I, for one, am someone who is very familiar with theories about video games and computer games alike. Now, I've already done a top 10 fake cartoon theories list, as well as a top 10 fake fan theories list. So now it's time to more or less complete the trilogy to prove that you can draw parallels between computer games, video games, and anything in between. I'm going to be giving you my top 10 list of fake game theories. Online, video games have this reputation for being notorious. Video games are notorious for spawning toxic fandoms, so if you are a fan of Pokemon, The Legend of Zelda, and especially Sonic the Hedgehog, or are a video game addict in general, you might want to brace yourselves and or click off of this video, because this is my top 10 list of fake game theories. Mario and Link switched bodies at some point right before the fourth Legend of Zelda game began. Now, as you can see, the main character of this video game is fighting against Goombas, Piranha Plants, Thwomps, Boos, Bloopers, Bob-ombs, and Cheep Cheeps. All of these enemies come from Bowser's Kingdom. They're not random Zelda enemies, so what in the world are they doing all the way out here on an island in the middle of nowhere? Unless they were specifically hunting Mario at the request of their boss, I have no idea what they would be doing here. I mean, come on. There's even a level that looks like it's straight out of a Mario game, and Link just maneuvers through it, almost as if it were Mario in Link's body. So, I'm pretty sure I've proven my point. This guy here is Mario. At some point before the third Zelda sequel, Mario and Link switched bodies, which is why the fourth Zelda game is crawling with Bowser's minions. And every major character in the Pokemon video games was someone evil when they were alive in this world. And every major character in the Pokemon video games was someone evil when they were alive in this world. Al Capone was the most ruthless mobster of the 1920s. Bonnie and Clyde were also vicious outlaws from around that time period. It's only fitting that Al Capone would become the first champion, where Bonnie and Clyde would be reincarnated into the Gen 1 rival and the first Gen 1 female protagonists, doomed to a... Bonnie and Clyde were also vicious outlaws from around that time period. It's only fitting that Al Capone would become the first champion, where Bonnie and Clyde would be reincarnated into the Gen 1 rival and the first Gen 1 female protagonists, doomed to a nothing more than relics of a bygone era. Adolf Hitler was a genocidal fascist devil in life. In death, he remains a fascist, but instead of being able to take his own life, he's doomed to constantly be thwarted by a 10-year-old. Joseph Stalin was a dictator who rose to power on a lie of equality. The kind of way of life that would never work regardless of how you tried to alter it, and would still be unfair regardless of how you tried to make said way of life work. It's only fitting that a man who rose to power on a lie of equality would more or less fight for the equality of devils, who, might I add, if unchecked, could easily kill an actual human, but that's beside the point. The point is, he rose to power on the lie of equality. Now he can spend eternity fighting for the equality of devils. In life, Osama bin Laden was the man behind the terrorist act known as 9/11. In death, he became the malicious Lavender Town ghost. In life, he had brought down the Twin Towers, so it's only fitting that he spend all of eternity haunting an actual tower. And there you have it, the true identities of some of the most legendary Pokemon trainers in the history of the franchise. It truly is beyond ironic that tons of children all over the world dream of being Pokemon masters. And it's not just gullible children. there are teenagers and adults as well out there who would do some really messed up things, even for a chance to be a real Pokemon trainer, let alone a Pokemon master. The one thing that they just don't understand is what it takes to get there. So, after hearing this truth, let me ask you, do you still even want to try to become number one? SCP-5254, also known as Gotta Catch 'Em All, is actually the force behind creepypasta. In all fairness, the idea of, various Pokemon games glitching and going haywire, and more or less causing temporary to permanent insanity, not to mention sending the people who played those games on homicidal rampages, isn't exactly the kind of thing that would go over well. If anything, it's the type of thing that would get the people running Nintendo arrested, as it would make front page news, and every news network on the planet and or in the country of where this occurred would be covering this story before any others, because it's just so interesting seeing Pokemon's true face. Why do you think that creepypastas have been limited to the internet and the various wikis? Answer? Because the SCP are more or less censoring things behind the scenes. They're trying to find the guy who was responsible for SCP-5254, and since the Foundation has a way of doing things, i.e., that way being a need-to-know basis, they would feel the need to censor a phenomenon like this as much as possible, restricting it to the internet, and trying to say that these Pokemon horror stories are just horror stories, and that they're not real. Two games that actually are connected to creepypasta are Sonic.exe and Polybius, a killer arcade game long since thought to be an urban legend. until a copy of it was found in Portland, Oregon. Yes, I know there are people skeptical, but for all we know, the government could have easily reprogrammed the thing and removed the creepypasta-like programming, which made the game have so much in common with Lavender Town Syndrome. The SCP are the secret puppeteers behind the American government and every other government in general, and Polybius was created by the US government. SCP-5254 was converting actual kids into Pokemon. I really don't think it's that far of a stretch to say that he managed to get his hands on either Polybius's original programming or an original Pocket Monsters cartridge before Nintendo altered the programming to make the whole creepypasta Lavender Town Syndrome brainwashing and all of the subliminal messages that came with it less effective, and more or less started cranking out these hacked games, essentially brainwashing whoever plays them into becoming mass-murdering psychos. If anything, he might know who programmed the original killer copy of Sonic.exe. And if anything, this pretty much confirms it. SCP-5254, or addressing him by his code name, Gotta Catch 'Em All, is the one responsible for cursing the world with creepypasta. Nintendo will try to make Bowsette canon in some way, shape, or form. This one is kind of self-explanatory. We all know that Bowsette is a really popular character, so it really wouldn't be out of the realms of plausibility that Nintendo would try to make her canon, especially since they kinda did that already. Yep, there was a guidebook released for Super Mario Odyssey where we more or less saw an unused transformation for Princess Peach that really does resemble Bowsette. Now, it's more than obvious that Bowsette is a popular character. She really did break the internet when she made her big debut, and it really wouldn't be a smart business move for Nintendo not to try and make her canon. Especially since they almost did, in a way. Now, this can happen one of two ways. One, they'll introduce Bowsette as a transformation. It will either be a form that Princess Peach is transformed into unwillingly by Bowser, or it will be a power-up that she'll use to fight enemies in a future game where she would be playable. Or they will introduce Bowsette and make her essentially the rival to Princess Peach. And, you know, basically a Mario-Wario type rivalry. Either that, or they'll just have Bowsette as an evil version of Princess Peach. Maybe a clone created by Bowser? Maybe a long-lost twin sister who was mutated? Or maybe Nintendo will go the multiverse route and make Bowsette in a version of Princess Peach from an alternate universe where she was on Bowser's side instead of Mario's, and would have chosen Bowser over Mario. But I will address the elephant in the room. When Nintendo does this, they will rename the character, because they're not going to let the guy who created it essentially get his way by making his OC canon. My best guess is they will most likely rename her to Princess Koopa or Queen Bowser. The true continuity of any and all video games is what's presented on the classic box art. In other words, Mario actually dies in the first game, and every other sequel is just his dying dream. Kirby is actually white and wears gray shoes. And this is what Mega Man actually looks like. No anime style, no Mega Buster, just this. And if you're wondering how I came to this conclusion, well, simple. When Mega Man was officially put into Street Fighter X Tekken as a guest character, Capcom, well, used this design, making it kind of obvious that this is the one true Mega Man. Mario died, and all of the sequels were more or less his dying dream. And it's kind of obvious that Mega Man 2, as well as Mega Man 3, are really more or less in-universe movies and possibly anime, since Mega Man didn't look the way he does in-game, the way he does on the box, until Mega Man 3. If anything, this is more or less either an in-universe anime or in-universe cartoon with this being an in-universe movie. Based on the exploits of the one true Mega Man, who only had one battle against Dr. Wily, who most likely was killed either fighting him or trying to escape from him. So yeah, the true continuity of any and all video game franchises are actually what's seen on the box art or cover art of the first installment in the franchise. Nintendo cartoons would have been saved if a Wario Land series was made. It's no big secret that in the late 90s, cartoons based off of video games weren't really the kind of thing that would turn a profit. But at the time, the Wario Land series was very popular. In fact, it was popular enough to get a remake on the Game Boy Color when Nintendo started essentially remaking Game Boy games for their upgraded console that actually rendered games in color. And I know what you're gonna say. Legend of Zelda 4 also got a remake on the Game Boy Color. But here's the thing. The last Zelda cartoon actually left a bad taste in the mouths of the already toxic Legend of Zelda fanbase. And at the time, the Donkey Kong Country cartoon was still running. And from what I hear on the internet, people don't exactly look back at it with fond memories. Not to mention, later that same year, The Legend of Zelda would fall from being second place to third place after the release of Pokemon. But Wario was popular enough not only to get the full-color remake treatment, but to get 2 sequels after that. One coming out in 2000 and another in 2001. There was a rumored Super Mario 64 cartoon in the works that would be done in the vein of Donkey Kong Country, but it's either just a rumor or something that was scrapped at least halfway or midway through production. So yeah, I can safely say that a Wario Land animated series for Saturday morning cartoons would have actually not only been a good idea, but it would have saved Nintendo cartoons before Illumination would revive the concept with the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Pokemon was originally supposed to be Moemon. That was the original concept for the franchise, but Nintendo got cold feet and turned it into just another monster battle game instead of something truly unique, because they were scared that, well, the Karens would get upset and start rioting and protesting like no tomorrow. And truth be told, this aspect of the franchise actually did make it into certain episodes of the Pokemon anime, as you can see here. The Pokemon anime is definitely an adaptation where Nintendo would know what's going on at all times, and there would be no way that they wouldn't, and or the studio working on it could put something in it that would come off as a surprise. Since it's made in the same country as Nintendo's the main branch of the company, this fusion of either girl or woman and Pokemon happens a lot more in the anime adaptation than one would believe. It's not just limited to a certain episode, several screenshots of which you're currently seeing on screen right now. The imagery of a girl who's half Pokemon appears a lot in the anime. Almost as if on purpose. I mean, when you look at Western TV and film, there are a lot of things that happen in it that were in the original concept or draft, but were altered or changed for the final cut. And these costumes that create the image of a woman or girl who's half Pokemon could easily be the remnants of the game's original concept. The original idea that Nintendo scrapped because they were afraid that the Karens would get offended by the concept, or in this case, the original premise for the game. I mean, just look on DeviantArt. The costumes that are appearing in the images from this one episode alone were iconic enough to be turned into several pieces of fan art, to the point where you could easily assume that Moemon is actually the original concept, but Nintendo truly did not have the guts to go through with it. And these Pokemon costumes were actually thrown in as nods to the original premise. My point is that the image and or concept is iconic. It's as iconic as Ash's hat, or his Pikachu, or Team Rocket's intro. And if it wasn't, I guarantee you, Nintendo actually would have complained, since, as established earlier, the Pokemon anime is produced in the same country as Nintendo's main headquarters. And I really don't think they would allow this to be in the anime if they didn't think it would be a successful and iconic staple of the franchise. Another good comparison would be the metal bikini from Star Wars. Like it or not, it is an icon of the franchise. It's as iconic to Star Wars as Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, the lightsaber battles, the space battles, and even the I am your father moment from the climax of The Empire Strikes Back. George Lucas put this in the film because he knew it would be iconic and he knew it would be successful. He wouldn't have put it in the final movie of his first trilogy if he didn't think it would be successful. And he sure as hell wouldn't do it if he thought it could destroy the franchise. And I could easily see the original Moemon game from 2007 actually having been created by some guy who helped program the original, who in a weird way only did it because he wanted to see the original concept for what would be Nintendo's number 2 franchise fully realized and become something that would step out of Pokemon's shadow. As in something that would become way better than Pokemon could ever be. And if that was the case, he succeeded. So it should be obvious by now to everyone that Moemon was the original concept. The concept that was thrown out and replaced by disgusting monsters. The concept that had way more potential than Pokemon would ever have worldwide, and the actual concept that if they went with this would have kicked Mario off of the throne of being Nintendo's top-selling franchise. Chris is Frisk's twin brother. Well, I mean, just look at it. They look almost identical. And you're probably going to point out the fact that Chris is in high school while Frisk is a little kid. Well, I could easily explain that with two possibilities. One, either you don't age in the underground, or the underground has some kind of weird mechanic that causes you to age very slowly. Or number two, anywhere from a day to a week inside the internet is a decade in the outside world. And if that's the reason, then the next time Chris and Frisk see each other, Chris is going to be a grown man, while Frisk will still be a little kid. Sonic is the villain. Notice how there are no humans in any of the Sonic the Hedgehog games, except for his arch enemy. Well, that's because that one scientist guy he fights is more or less the last human on Earth, fighting to avenge the species that Sonic drove to extinction in a destructive rampage. People claim that they have seen human beings in the main Sonic universe, but my argument to that is one installment in the first generation of Sonic games basically is a time travel story, and it makes all of this make sense. This scientist, the last human alive, failed to stop Sonic from wiping out humanity. And he basically fought fire with fire and created a robot Sonic to kill the original Blue Menace. And yes, I know that there's a theory that he captured Sonic and turned him into a robot, and this guy is basically the future version of the Blue Menace. But the theory works like this. The timeline is simple. 1. Sonic destroys humanity, leaving this guy as the last human on Earth, or in existence, fighting to avenge the species that Sonic drove to the brink of extinction. 2. Any and all Sonic games. And 3. The one where this character makes his first appearance is the end of the timeline, where he fights, he wins, the Blue Menace is destroyed, and this guy sadly remains as the last human on Earth. The appearance of any other humans in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise is more or less due to a time warp and or time travel paradox. As in, these games are set at a point in the timeline before Sonic's campaign to end humanity began. But believe me, it will begin. And the Blue Menace will meet his end at the hands of his robot counterpart. Moemon is the sequel to Stranger Things. Now, this theory actually does work on a timeline. After defeating the Nazis in World War II, the Cold War officially began, and we scrambled to gather as many of the top scientists from the defeated Nazi Axis as humanly possible and put them to work on whatever we could to help us beat the Soviets. We developed projects around mind control and telekinesis, such as MK Ultra, and around 20 to 30 years later, the events of Stranger Things occur. And here's the actual thing that proves this theory true. Well, and 11 is the key. She, after the events of the show, goes on to become the Moemon version of Mew. As seen in this Robot Chicken sketch, 11's telekinetic abilities are obscenely strong, to the point where she's able to make things happen out of nowhere. So it is kind of obvious that she goes on to be the original Moemon. The government knew about 11, but they didn't stop. They saw her psychic abilities as an asset, and considering types, they thought, why stop at psychic types? And in secret, they continued genetically engineering Moemon, knowing that they would be the key to winning the Cold War. Because if you've seen the show, you'd be fully aware that Stranger Things takes place in the 1980s. As the American government continued to genetically engineer Moemon, eventually they evolved said Moemon and sent them to Soviet Russia. And that event basically has only one logical end goal. The
United States of America having completely destroyed the Soviet Union.
And dominate them we did. With the aid of Moemon, we essentially dominated and tore apart the Soviet Union, stole their nukes, and forced them into a surrender. And here's the thing. Being the thing that won the Cold War made Moemon really popular. And with no war to fight, the Moemon League was eventually formed. Going on strong through the 1990s, with the events of the first game taking place in the year 2007, the second occurring around probably 2009, Moemon Platinum being in probably 2012, Moemon Black and White occurring in the 2020s, and the various side games taking place at different points during the 2010s. So who knows? Maybe 11, or Mew as she's now known, one day went back to her old home to see her old friends and snack on some Eggos like she did in the good old days that happened 40 years ago. Now, do I believe any of this? The answer is no. But I specifically made this video for one of two reasons. One, to show how you can draw parallels between anything, and two, the fact that, well, game theories are kinda dumb, even though that's what makes them interesting. And what better way to show off both of those 2 points than to make a top 10 list of fake game theories.